Warm welcome. Welcome at the Dutch Blockchain Day. It's great to have you with us. Maybe you can start with a short introduction about yourself. How did your Web3 journey started and what is your organization actually doing? Dusk. Emanuele.
Well, Dusk is a very ambitious organization that tries essentially to put real-world assets to any user wallet. So what we're trying to do, we are trying to ferry what is called DeFi into what we call the Reg DeFi, regulated and decentralized finance. And of course, MiCA is a very important piece of the puzzle in our journey. So I'm very happy to be here to talk about it today.
Yeah. Great. Martijn, Loyens Loeff.
Yeah, thanks. My name is Martijn Schoonewille, part of one of the partners at Loyens Loeff. Loyens Loeff, for those who do not yet know them, it's a European firm. We're basically the second largest European continental firm, 1,600 people. And a large part focuses on financial markets and products. And that's the reason why MiCA is really on our radar. Maybe about the connection with Web3. Basically, when I did my studies, I did a little bit of coding next to law.
What kind of languages did you code?
Basically, it was the old days, right? So just Java, Miranda, those type of languages. Ultimately, I chose the legal path, which I still don't regret, even though some may doubt it.
More exciting.
Exactly. But in 2015, basically, when there was a spur of more questions around qualifications, regulatory qualifications about products, it basically came back together. So I participated in hackathons and since been involved in monitoring the development. So really pleased to speak today with Emanuele and Wieger on the topic.
Yeah, Wieger, I guess you also have been monitoring the developments quite closely at Bitvavo.
Yes. Yeah, so my name is Wieger. I am working with Bitvavo as the head of the compliance team. Bitvavo, one of the Dutch cryptocurrency exchanges, have been active for nearly 5 years. For me, this whole journey into crypto and Web3 started when I was working with Flow Traders, my previous job, because we're now also on a crossroad. We now know that regulation is coming. Back then, this was 2017, we wanted to dip our toes into crypto, but how do you do that? How do you do that compared to working in a regulated environment? So we try to set the standards ourselves, and it's really fun to now, for me as a lawyer, it's really fun to see how that actually now comes together in a regulation.
Now compliance is a little, for some people, a tough word. What is compliance? What if you're compliant?
Compliance is that you adhere to both your own rules and regulation, but also to the rules and regulations that you have in the environment that you're active in.
So internal code of conduct, but also the Dutch law.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, or European laws for that matter.
European law.
So I think compliance indeed sometimes scares people off.
Yeah. Why?
Because obviously there's a lot of rules involved.
Isn't that good?
I think so. Obviously, for obvious reasons. But at the same time, I think in general it's good because it just also makes sure that we have the market as we all would like it to have, being optimal, and making sure that people are not scared off to participate. So indeed, compliance is usually a bit scary, but hopefully not after today.
And not after today, of course. Next year, of course, the MiCA will be in place. Most organizations, I hope so, are already implementing the regulation. Is Dusk already compliant with the MiCA?
Well, it is a very interesting question, considering that compliance with MiCA is one of our ambition. There is still a lot that needs to be still defined, even though the regulation is currently getting more and more solidified, so to speak. And therefore, there are some, fine-tuning details that need to be worked out also at the regulatory level. But indeed, Dusk has always been very attentive to regulation, and therefore we started our pathway since 2017, 2018 with regulation in mind. Yeah. And therefore, yes, I can safely and confidently say that Dusk will is definitely on the path for MiCA compliance.
Bitvavo as well, because it's a huge crypto exchange.
We had in a pre-discussion as well, are you ready? Yes, but also no. Because if you look at the process of how regulation is being created, so MiCA has been ongoing discussions since I think already 4 or 5 years ago, so when it was first introduced. And now, like my LinkedIn feed last months have been like people cheering, like we finally have MiCA and we now have a date. But then the work just starts because actually we know that we need to have rules about safekeeping of client assets or market abuse, or that we need to adhere to certain disclosures or have capital requirements. But we actually only know the top level. So how it's going to be determined, that is going to be the discussion that we're going to have in the next period of time. So if you look at MiCA, the effective date or the introduction date for stablecoin issuers, I think, is mid-24, and for exchanges such as Bitvavo or VASP, it's the 30th.
What is a VASP?
A VASP, a virtual asset service provider.
Yeah, right.
Or CASP, there's a crypto asset service. You have lots of these definitions. But the 30th of December 24 is going to be the effective date. So that's going to be the big bang while everybody is in a change freeze. Super nice timing. But like as an industry, I think it's important to know that MiCA is just there. And we know already that next month in October and in Q1 24, we are going to get a large chunk of extra rules. And that's actually where the pudding is being created before we can even start eating it.
Yeah.
Okay.
No. Yeah, because maybe it's just good to add, to put things in perspective, right? When you look at the regulation, that's the way how European legislation typically works, is you have your top layer, your level 1 legislation, and that subsequently it's further being detailed. Like Wieger correctly mentioned, by consultation and market. So hopefully the market also actually participates in getting input. And then the level 2 legislation is being developed. And then later on, I would expect that there will be further guidance by the regulators, usually first at the European level, ESMA. But they also indicated that they will speak with the other ESAs, the other European supervisory authorities, like the European Banking Authority, because it also relates to the e-money tokens, right? So
what is an e-money token?
E-money token is basically a token which, let's say if we put it very simple, is linked to one official currency.
So stable coins.
Yeah. That's, but we more or less.
More or less.
Yeah. What is the aim? But also, if you look at the regulation, such, it's obviously highly complex. I think that's what I want to build on, and don't deviate, let's say, to dive for the question. But it's more about we first see this level 1 legislation, and that is, let's say, how it typically works in the financial markets. And so, indeed, it's nothing new. But what is new and what is a bit of a trend, which we see in new legislation, is that the legislation is being developed while parties are already put to a certain deadline. In this case, the 30th of December 2024, which seems a long way from us, but it's not. If you really want to implement, you really need to start acting on it.
And what is new?
Because it's just like building a startup, right? So you're building a car while you're still developing the car, while you're driving it. You don't know how the roads will happen. So.
No, because that was also one of the interesting topics that we discussed in our pre-discussion. I mean, we're talking about what is new, but I think one of you already mentioned, like the MiCA, it is already outdated. It's basically, as a Dutch saying is beautifully mentioning, like it is putting old wine in new bottles, new bags, right? Do you agree on that? Like still, is it already outdated?
No, I disagree with that.
Okay.
I actually do think that basically MiCA introduces one thing that is very important and is very new for the entirety of the industry, which is, in fact, the recognition that crypto assets do exist. Yeah. I mean, there wasn't really anything that said something that is so that can definitely be a statement in that perspective. Yeah. And we see struggling, for example, the US, the SEC, for instance, struggling because they don't have this definition, they don't have this recognition. Crypto assets, in fact, in US, arguably, right now, I could say that they do not exist. Mm. In fact, it is all about, commodities. It is all about securities. And where are they? Whereas with MiCA, essentially, we are Europe, for how imperfect and for how probably ill-defined it is right now. We have this statement, which is an official statement, and is probably the first real important statement Europe-wise, that in fact, crypto assets do exist.
Yeah.
I agree. If you also compare to the discussions prior, which if you look at, for instance, in the UK, the whole crypto industry was also ready. We also want to do some sort of MiCA. And then they ended up with gambling, which is, of course, not where, if you want to develop and you want to have a thriving industry, then it's, of course, it's unbeneficial if you're then being labeled as a gambling industry.
Yeah. Now, are there any pressing regulatory challenges that are not covered by MiCA, or is everything already implemented? What do you think, Martijn?
Wow. Yeah, the MiCA, we also need to realize that it's already, let's say, quite far-reaching, right? So it basically covers the whole market. And whether you're an exchange or other types of intermediaries, issuers, or basically users, investors in the product, then you suddenly need to be mindful of also market abuse regulation. So basically a package of rules that existed already for fixed income and your usual equities is now also going to apply to crypto assets, which indeed is new, but at the same time is also to be developed because ESMA will come up with new guidelines to say, okay, where should we put a pin in the ground between either what is a financial instrument or a crypto asset? Are we there yet? On your question, no. Obviously, when you have MiCA 1, you will have MiCA 2. I can already tell you. But equally, I think it's also good to realize, and there will be a breakout session later on about tax aspects that is usually overlooked.
There are many different things that are overlooked. One of the things, according to me, is, for instance, just a statement about the harmonization with other kind of laws. I mean, there isn't really anything that right now says, for instance, how MiCA compliant companies can also comply with GDPR, for instance. This is one topic that is very dear to me at Dusk because Dusk is a privacy preserving protocol. And so the harmonization is definitely one. There is another one, which is also a very interesting aspect, which MiCA doesn't touch at all, which is governance. I mean, we saw, for instance, a new form of governance like DAOs, for example, which is not new. I mean, DAOs have been there since 2015 from the disaster of the DAO. But just because it was a disaster, the first experiment, then you would probably expect the regulation to be aware of it and to, express a certain particular, opinion at least. So that is also something that is definitely missing, I think.
I think regulation is always behind because regulation is always a response to something that's happening in the market. In this case, I think the events of last years have also accelerated some of the things. So we know this is just the beginning. It's a journey. We need to get there. There are already talks about MiCA 2. As long as we have it on the roadmap, that also on the decentralized side, there is a lot of benefit, but there's also a lot of risks that we need to mitigate or can mitigate. And potentially it's also that we as users are going to expect more from decentralized exchanges or decentralized intermediaries. I think having such standards in place will also kind of set a higher bar for other instances and entities.
Focusing on these users, because we've been focusing on MiCA impacts on organizations, on governments, and that kind of stuff. But users, that was also one of the questions coming from the audience. How will MiCA impact the individual investor that either buys or holds or is actively trading assets crypto assets?
Yeah, if I may start, because users and adoption is also quite important for the Dusk protocol. Then I would say that users are impacted in a lot of different ways. So probably the most immediate one is the fact that there are strict requirements that, for instance, for what concerns KYC, right? So at
your customer.
Yes, know your customer and anti-money laundering, regulations that will come in effect. So, for instance, of course, the colleagues at Bitvavo will probably say a little more about it. But whenever you are, off-ramping or on-ramping the liquidity to crypto or from crypto.
What do you mean? Can you maybe make it a little easier?
Okay. So when you are in crypto, you are essentially into a sandbox, right? So I cannot really go to the supermarket and buy stuff with Ethereum. I need fiat. So when I am
some shops in the Netherlands offer
to some shop, the forward-looking one, the wise one. But for most people, for my mother, for instance, then when they go shopping, they need fiat, right? Or
like euros, like dollars.
Like euros, like dollars. And of course, one of the good things about MiCA is the fact that a digital representation of fiat is indeed one of these other things that has been recognized. But indeed, off-ramping or on-ramping means essentially turning crypto in fiat and vice versa, right? So whenever a user needs to off-ramp or on-ramp, it needs to do so according to certain rules that they have never been completely enforced, and they were sort of a patchwork of the different CASP, WASP, or whatever, VASP, or whatever you want to call them. So virtual asset service provider or crypto asset service provider.
So basically it means like nowadays, Bitvavo and all the cryptocurrency exchanges, to make it very easy, everybody's obliged to identify themselves, right? That's one of the key things, to really make sure the cryptocurrency exchange is making sure to check your identity, to save your identity, to make sure that you are the person who's actually proclaiming themselves on the platform, trading, buying, whatever, holding assets.
Yeah, indeed. Indeed.
Collecting a lot of data, and ultimately, and that is also not only MiCA, but also DAC 8, which is coming at us. Basically, that is...
Sorry, what is it? DAC
8. Look it up, but we will speak about it later on as well. But it's basically a tool for tax transparency. And there, if you look at DAC 8, it's basically building on the definitions of what MiCA is providing for, but imposing an obligation for a lot of these exchanges to report a lot of data. But that it also means about, let's say, who is trading on the platform, and on an aggregated basis, the type of volume for the different types of tokens which are being traded. So, no, and that also ties back to your question. Have we seen the end of the regulation yet? No. But we can also still use some of the other pieces, like your ordinary civil law protections, which you also need to take into account. So it is a little bit too much. You can maybe ask, I don't think so, but it's just a mindset change, which we need to go through.
Now we've been. Please,
can I just from the client side, because I think if you look at the user side, what this set of regulations will bring is harmonization about how we in Europe think we should protect our clients, and I think that's a very important factor. It has been a Wild West. We are seeing firms with lower standards that are actually setting a lower bar for everybody. And if we want to have mass adoption for blockchain, crypto, Web3, then we need a viable and good story about this. So that's something that we need to continue to build on together.
I think it's important to continue building on, because for now, in my perspective, we've only been discussing centralized solutions, right? With like an entity, like a BV in the Netherlands, like a limited agency. But blockchain, in basis is, of course, decentralized. So how are we going to regulate these decentralized protocols, like the decentralized finance, the decentralized autonomous organizations? Is it actually possible?
Yes, it is.
I
firmly believe it is.
Okay.
So what is actually decentralization? I mean, this is probably the question that is pertinent. And this goes a little away from MiCA, but I'll get back there in a second. It's basically self-sovereignty, right? So self-custody. The capability for a user to exert complete control over the assets that they own. This is the decentralization. That is what it is. So
they're not stored at the bank, but you own your own coins. Exactly. Or self-sovereignty. You own your own identity.
Exactly. Yeah. You own, or you dispose, you control, you compose, depending. These kind of actions start from the user. And there is nobody that can, according to a framework of law, and this is why compliance is very important, because there is a legislative compliance, but there is also a technical compliance. For instance, you cannot use the internet to send an SMS directly. You need to go through a certain translation layer. So that is a technical compliance. So because of that, basically, the self-sovereignty is the decentralization, or one of the key ingredients of decentralization. This means that translating law into code might, in fact, just provide you with what a regulated and decentralized finance might actually mean, which is what we are trying to do.
Martijn, do you agree?
Yes, but at the same time, but this is always the legal answer, is let's say there are two sides of coins, I would almost say, right? Because because if you look at MiCA, it also really focuses on still some intermediary risk which you like to cover off by means of the crypto asset intermediaries and the crypto asset service providers. So, but indeed, the question is, and recently the European Systematic Board also came out with a new report about, let's say, to what extent is decentralized financing actually decentralized, right? Are there ultimately not only a few players who direct how things are going? And then it's maybe more of a question. And I like that phrase. If you look at the same kind of activities with the same risk, you should apply the same kind of rules. And I think that's what we are now after. And so true, I think that with regard to the actual decentralized solutions, MiCA may not be the let's say, providing a lot of guidance. But we already have tools. So it does not mean that the regulator is completely without any teeth to enforce should it be needed.
Yeah. And you also run additional risk if so we also need more guidance for decentralization and decentralized finance, because otherwise it might happen that the traditional or the classical finance industry, which then crypto will also be part of, even if you look at it, that you have like these de-risking issues that all decentralized finance is being cut off from the traditional entrance points, which is also not beneficial for growing an industry. So that's why we need to build. I think that's my main point for today.
Yeah,
we're not done yet.
We're not done, yeah. But I guess what you already mentioned is like an ongoing process. It will never end, right? So we have like quarter 2 of next year. We have December of next year. Some milestones will be set. To close down the panel, what should be incorporated in MiCA version 2? Do you already have some thoughts about what should be incorporated? Like a new aspect, for example, the combination of crypto within the metaverse, or what kind of elements would you love to get incorporated in the next version of MiCA?
You want to go first?
Sure, I'll go first. There are 3 things that I actually would like to see incorporated. The very first thing is basically how the digital identity regulation, because also we saw not only MiCA happening lately, but also the EU DI, so the European Union Digital Identity. That is another regulation or a suite of different tools that have been propagated by the European Union. And I think it is key and very important to harmonize MiCA with the EU DI. That is the first thing that I would like to see happening. The second thing that I would like to see happening is basically a more formal opinion about governance, about what kind of governance and what the different kind of governance need to take into consideration in order to comply to the law. Because if we are talking about a decentralization that is user-centric, then that is different than a governance-centric decentralization. Essentially, basically having somebody that hoards all the tokens if it is on-chain governance and can dictate governance about certain specific assets. And the third one is privacy.
More privacy. Martijn?
If I could express a desire, it would be fantastic if in MiCA 2 we would also spend time and consideration to basically private international law considerations. Something which is often overlooked is, let's say, the potential conflicts between the different laws that apply to activities, services, or tokens. Ultimately, that is something to be mindful of. So if let's say, in MiCA or ancillary legislation, we could spend time on considerations. Okay, you have those tokens. They are being administered with either Bitvavo or with the Coinbase in London. Which rules do actually apply? Should you look at indeed the protocol? Should we look at the governing law of the relevant issuer? What should we look at? Currently, we have ways around it to think about it, but it's not easy. I think it would very welcome the international trade and to really put that to bed.
Yeah. For me, as already mentioned earlier, the fact that crypto assets are now being recognized as something that's there or is being adopted, for me, MiCA 2 should be less. So MiCA 2 should be scaling down, trying to connect it more to already existing parts of the legislation. So
forget what I said. That
because in the end, it's not new. All the stuff that's in MiCA is a transposition of something that's already applying for 5, 10, 15, 20 years in traditional classical finance. So let's indeed, the knee-jerk reaction is always to get more regulation into place. I would like really make a statement for less and make it simpler and easier.
Make it simpler, make it easier. Gentlemen, good luck with the further implementation, the further developments within your own organization. Wieger, Martijn, and Emanuele. Many thanks for the conversation.
Cheers. Thank you.